Excellencies, the 421st meeting of the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People is called to order. The agenda for this meeting is before the committee in document A/183/2025/LI. If I hear no objections, I shall consider it adopted. It is so decided. I now invite the committee to consider candidatures for the posts of chair, vice chairs, and rapporteur of the committee. The Secretariat of the committee has received the following candidates: His Excellency Mr. Koli Sek, Permanent Representative of Senegal as chair. His Excellency Mr. Neville Melvin Gertze, Permanent Representative of Namibia as vice chair. His Excellency Mr. Jaime Hermida Castillo, Permanent Representative of Nicaragua as vice chair. His Excellency Mr. Ahmad Faisal Muhammad, Permanent Representative of Malaysia as vice chair and rapporteur. His Excellency Ambassador Armanata Kristiawan Nasir of Indonesia as Vice Chair. His Excellency Mr. Ernesto Soberon Guzman, Permanent Representative of Cuba as Vice Chair. Before we proceed with the election, are there any comments or questions? If there are no comments and no requests for the floor, I shall take it that the committee approves the proposal just made and unanimously elects His Excellency Mr. Koli Sek, Permanent Representative of Senegal to the United Nations, as chair of the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People. I also take it that the committee unanimously elects as vice chairs His Excellency Mr. Jaime Hermida Castillo, Permanent Representative of Nicaragua to the United Nations. His Excellency Mr. Neville Melvin Gertz, Permanent Representative of Namibia to the United Nations. His Excellency Mr. Ernesto Soberon Guzman, Permanent Representative of Cuba to the United Nations. His Excellency Mr. Ambassador Armanata Kristiawan of Indonesia. I also take it that the committee unanimously elects as Vice Chair and Rapporteur His Excellency Mr. Ahmad Faisal Muhammad, Permanent Representative of Malaysia to the United Nations. It is so decided. I now invite His Excellency Mr. Koli Sek to take a seat at the podium. Shall I change seats?
Thank you very much, Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I would like to thank the Secretary General for taking the time to be with us today and for presiding over the Bureau election. Turning on to item 3 on the agenda, I now have the distinct honor of giving the floor to Secretary General António Guterres. You have the floor.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair, Ambassador Koli Sek, Bureau members, let me begin by congratulating you on your election. And I want to salute this committee for its work. At its essence, the exercise of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people is about the right of Palestinians to simply live as human beings in their own land. We have seen the realization of those rights steadily slip further out of reach. We have seen a chilling, systematic dehumanization and demonization of an entire people. Of course, nothing justifies the horrific Hamas attacks on October 7, and nothing justifies what we have seen unfold in Gaza over the last many months. We all know too well the catalogue of destruction and unspeakable horrors. The nearly 50,000 people, 70% of them women and children, who have been reportedly killed. The majority of Gaza's civilian infrastructure, hospitals, schools and water facilities that have been destroyed. The overwhelming majority of the entire population who have faced displacement after displacement, hunger and disease. Children out of school for over a year. A generation left homeless and traumatized. In these conditions, I welcome the ceasefire and the hostage release deal. I thank the mediators, Egypt, Qatar and the United States for the continued efforts to ensure implementation. Now it is time to be crystal clear about objectives going forward. First, we must keep pushing for a permanent ceasefire and release of all hostages without delay. We cannot go back to more death and destruction. For our part, the UN is working around the clock to reach Palestinians in need and scale up support. That requires humanitarian access that is rapid, safe, unimpeded, expanded and sustained. I call on member states, donors, and the international community to fully fund humanitarian operations and meet urgent needs. And I once again urge member states to support the essential work of UNRWA. Second, in the search for solutions, we must not make the problem worse. It is vital to stay true to the bedrock of international law. It is essential to avoid any form of ethnic cleansing. Third, we must reaffirm the two-state solution. Any durable peace will require tangible, irreversible, and permanent progress toward the two-state solution, an end to the occupation, and the establishment of an independent Palestinian state with Gaza as an integral part. A viable sovereign Palestinian state living side by side in peace and security with Israel is the only sustainable solution for Middle East stability. Excellencies, beyond Gaza, the situation continues to unravel in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem. I am gravely concerned by rising violence by Israeli settlers and other violations. The violation must stop. As affirmed by the International Court of Justice, Israel's occupation of the Palestinian territory must end. International law must be respected and accountability ensured. We must work towards preserving the unity, continuity and integrity of the occupied Palestinian territory and the recovery and reconstruction of Gaza. A strong and unified Palestinian governance is crucial. The international community must support the Palestinian Authority to this end. Excellencies, the UN is fully committed to peace, stability and the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people. I commend this committee for its steadfast dedication to these goals and call on the international community to fully support these efforts, and I thank you.
I thank the Secretary-General for his statement. The committee deeply appreciates your principled stance on Gaza and the occupied Palestinian territory, as well as your firm rejection of ongoing violations of international law and UN resolutions pertaining on Palestine. Allow me now to make a statement in my capacity as elected chair to mark the first meeting of the committee in 2025. Excellence, Monsieur António Guterres, Secretary-General.
Your Excellency, António Guterres, Secretary-General of the United Nations, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, permanent representatives, distinguished colleagues, from the outset I would like to thank Mr. Secretary-General António Guterres for his presidency, as is the custom of this renewal meeting to renew the Bureau of our committee. His presence represents his ongoing commitment to the Palestinian cause. Mr. Secretary-General, I commend your leadership, your acute sense of responsibility, and your unchanging, courageous stances in line with international law and the pertinent resolutions of the United Nations for a peaceful, definitive solution to the Palestinian question. I would also like to pay tribute to those people, in particular UNRWA teams, who despite numerous obstacles continue to support innocent lives. I also do not want to forget our valued colleagues in the Division of Palestinian Rights for their commitment to attain the sacred humanitarian mission that the General Assembly has conferred upon us. Thank you for being on the right side of history. Secretary-General, sir, distinguished colleagues, I would like to thank each and every one of you for the trust that you have placed in me and my country through my election to the chairpersonship of the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People. Senegal, once again, is provided with an opportunity to continue its ongoing investment in the Palestinian cause that is so dear to us. May I assure you that this trust is not something that I will fail you in. With your support, I'm committed to continue resolutely necessary efforts to achieve the mandate that has been conferred upon us through the resolution of the 10th of November 1975, namely to strive for the full achievement of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people. I would also like to take this opportunity to congratulate all other members of the Bureau. I am convinced that with your commitment and your determination to the Palestinian cause, we will accomplish, despite the difficult context, we will accomplish significant achievements during this term. The ceasefire was a decisive step forward in terms of providing aid in safety towards the liberation, or rather the release of the hostages and prisoners and the return of the Gazans to their land. But over the past few days, there have been worrisome statements made seeking to undermine this. Our committee is very struck by this. We need to reinvent strategies to block the way for those enemies of peace on Palestinian ground that is so dear to us. These postures indeed exacerbate the already difficult situation on the ground. Civilian victims continue to be affected following attacks by the Israeli army, and the provision of humanitarian aid throughout the whole Palestinian territory is suffering because of the entry into force on the 30th of January, Israeli laws banning UNRWA operations in East Jerusalem and the West Bank. Whilst firmly condemning these unilateral legal measures against the Palestinian people, I would call upon the international community to rise up against these measures to defend this people, long oppressed, which has the right, as do all peoples of the world, to live in peace on the land of their ancestors. I would like to call upon the Secretary-General, who I am sure, as he has always done, will use his influence so that the Gazans can return peacefully to their own land. Secretary-General, sir, distinguished colleagues, this is a key year for the Palestinian cause. Our roadmap, in line with the mandate of the committee, must reflect the priorities which involve the implementation of the two-state solution based on the 1967 borders. Along these lines, the International Conference of June 2025 will be crucial in terms of finding a robust, serious consensus among the international community to find a just, lasting solution to the conflict in Palestine. It is important that at the heart of our action we include the opinion of the International Court of Justice and the United Nations resolutions, in particular Resolution ES-10/24, in order to bring the occupation to an end, as well as the risk of genocide and all other illegal measures and practices by Israel on the occupied territories. There's also a need to continue the work to call for, which has already given satisfying results, to achieve the recognition of the State of Palestine by the remaining member states and for it to be admitted as a fully fledged member into the United Nations. All of this work must be conducted in a comprehensive, coherent, inclusive framework. In conclusion, with this umbrella, so to speak, the dignity of our Palestinian brothers prevailing above all, I would like to assure you that the committee will do all it can in line with its mandate and through its work programme with the support of its partners to achieve the full exercise of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people and for a just, definitive, law-based solution to the issue. Thank you.
Item 4 on the agenda, I now have the distinct honour of giving the floor to His Excellency Minister Riyad Mansour, Permanent Observer of the State of Palestine to the United Nations, for an update on the situation in the occupied Palestinian territory. You have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, allow me at the beginning to extend our warmest congratulations to you for being re-elected as the chairman of the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights to the Palestinian people, and also to welcome you to New York. You are a friend. I have known you when you were in Geneva, and we welcome you, and we extend our readiness for working with you and cooperating with you for the success of the mandate of the committee in their involvement in the attainment of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people, including our right to self-determination, statehood, and the right of the refugees. Allow me also to express our congratulations to all the vice chairs, our colleagues who have been, serving with distinction this noble cause of the State of Palestine. We are grateful to them, and we are grateful to the committee for all the things that the committee is being involved in, and also to the Division of Palestinian Rights at the Secretariat. Also, I would like to welcome the Secretary-General and our friends, the senior colleagues from the Secretariat, Courtney and Khalid, for being with us. We commend you, Mr. Secretary-General, for your principled position from the beginning of this aggression against our people, particularly in the Gaza Strip, in which courageously you have called for a humanitarian assistance, a humanitarian ceasefire, and from the beginning you explained that to mean a ceasefire for humanitarian purposes. It is very unfortunate that it took 15 months to accomplish that objective, but to arrive late is better than not to arrive at all. We are delighted that we have a ceasefire, we have an agreement. We are grateful for those who made that agreement possible, but we want this agreement on a ceasefire to become a permanent ceasefire and to cover all parts of the occupied Palestinian territory, not to have a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip and to open hell on us in the West Bank, particularly the northern part of the West Bank. We want ceasefire to become a permanent ceasefire in all of Gaza and in all of the occupied Palestinian territory. Now, also, we want the implementation of all of the provisions in Stage 1, Stage 2, Stage 3 of this agreement. And by the way, in one of the stages, it talks about the reconstruction of Gaza and allowing the people of Gaza to return to the areas where they were displaced from. So this is what we've accomplished now. We need to make it permanent. In addition to that, we have now a tall order of responsibilities and objectives to accomplish during the course of the year 2025, especially from now until June and September and until the end of the year. These objectives would start from, number one, to defend UNRWA because it is the most successful story of multilateralism and the United Nations since its inception. This fabulous organization has been serving millions of Palestinian refugees, and it is carrying a noble activities in the service of our people, particularly in the Gaza Strip, which is in need of the most help that one asks for. UNRWA is involved in our schools, 125 of them in the Gaza Strip. It teaches 300,000 children, and I still vividly remember the visit that you paid to the Gaza Strip, and I had the honor of accompanying you. We saw firsthand our children in these schools, so bright, so articulate. One of them, the elected president, who told you, I am an elected president of the Council of Students in Schools of UNRWA, and I speak on behalf of the 300,000 students, and I want to speak to you from that authority of the 300,000 students. Such a bright young man that impressed you, impressed me, impressed all of us who were in attendance. And he also showed, and his colleagues, the best courtesy one expects, and you commended him and his colleagues, and you said, if I quote you correctly, almost correctly, that you served in so many parliaments and you haven't seen courtesy in parliaments as much as the courtesy that was demonstrated by those young kids. I don't know how many of them are still alive, how many orphaned, how many, is dead, but this is the experience that we notice. This is UNRWA. We know it well. It affected our lives. It became part of our DNA. We want to defend it. We want to continue with its mandate emanating from the General Assembly, and you are the #1 defender of UNRWA. We appreciate that. We commend you for that, and together we will continue the fight until UNRWA to continue providing the services for the 6 million plus Palestine refugees until there is a just political solution to the question of the refugees. This is the mandate of UNRWA. It is given to it by the General Assembly, and no government, no country has the authority to illegally legislate taking the power from that noble organization or try to destroy it. I pledge to you that we will continue working, and the committee will continue working, and all political groups, almost all nations, to defend the UNRWA, to carry out its mandate, and to continue with that exercise. The second objective or task is that we will work with everyone, with all member states, in order to have a successful international conference in June, co-chaired by Saudi Arabia and France, in order to accomplish the objectives called for by the ICJ, in which it characterized that this occupation, the prolonged occupation, is illegal, and it has to be terminated as quickly as possible. The General Assembly legislated that this illegal occupation has to be terminated within 1 year. And therefore, the ICJ also asked for modalities from all components of the UN, of course, including the General Assembly, to adopt modalities of how to implement the objective of ending this illegal occupation. Therefore, this international conference, which the preparation for the details of convening it, including the convening of prep conferences, who will lead them, the objectives, the themes, all of these things until we reach the date of the conference in the General Assembly under the auspices of the UN, with a very important role for the Secretary-General in this regard, to accomplish not only to have statements and to have a communique adopted as if business as usual. It should not be that way. What should be done is that each and every government and state and an international institution and regional groups to declare ahead of time commitments to objectives that they will undertake in order to allow for the accomplishment of the objective of ending this occupation. So this is how it's going to be done, and we invite each and every one country and institution to participate with us in this process so that we can accomplish the lofty objective of ending this occupation and having a political horizon for a two-state living side by side next to each other on the lines of the 1967 borders, for us with East Jerusalem as the capital of our state. Congruent with that is the effort by Saudi Arabia on behalf of the 8 countries from the Arab countries and the OIC at the ministerial level, and the European Union and Norway, who are building this global alliance for the two-state solution. The last meeting that took place in Norway, attended by 85 countries and regional organizations that will be working in tandem with the efforts of convening the International Peace Conference for the same objective of making the two-state a reality. Along with these things, we need you to help, all of you, the State of Palestine, its government, in order to allow the government to be able to shoulder its responsibility vis-à-vis the Gaza Strip. We need to rebuild the Gaza Strip. The Gaza Strip is a very precious component of the land of the State of Palestine. It is part of our homeland, and we don't have a homeland other than the State of Palestine. So therefore, we are not looking for other homelands or other countries. For those who want us to have a happy place and safe place, we will be delighted to return to our homes inside the State of Israel. This is where we originally were, kicked from. If they want to do that for us, we will welcome it. But short of that, Gaza is part of the State of Palestine. The West Bank is part of the State of Palestine, so is East Jerusalem. And we are grateful for all of our brothers who made clear statements so many times, including recently, that they do not support, in fact, they reject any idea of ethnic cleansing or kicking our people from the Gaza Strip under any reason or conditions. We are grateful to Jordan for making statements to that effect, from the king down the line, from in Egypt, from President Sisi down the line, from Saudi Arabia, and from President Mahmoud Abbas. And in fact, this is the position of the 2 summits, Arab and Muslims, that were convened last year in Riyadh, in which they agreed unanimously to oppose the displacement of the Palestinian people inside Gaza and from Gaza to outside Gaza. We don't want to create problems for Egypt or Jordan or any other states. We have plenty of problems in our own country. We want to rebuild it. We want to put it back together, and we ask all countries to help us in this endeavor and in this regard. During the last few days, there were intense meetings and communications between President Abbas and King Abdullah of Jordan. In fact, they met today in person in Amman, and with President Sisi and with Crown Prince MBS from Saudi Arabia, in which they are coordinating the Arab and the Muslim position so that His Majesty King Abdullah of Jordan, who will be in Washington, D.C. in a matter of few days to convey this collective message of the Arab Ummah and the Islamic Ummah. We have no country except Palestine. Gaza is a precious part of it. We are not going to leave Gaza. And the message of our Palestinian people, in hundreds of thousands of them, when they were given a few days ago the opportunity to return to the north, in a span of 2 days, few hours in 2 days, 400,000 Palestinians walked from the south to the north. This is our answer for those who want to kick us out of the Gaza Strip. There is no power on earth that can remove the Palestinian people from our ancestral homeland, including Gaza. These are the tall orders before us. We will work with you very closely, Mr. Secretary-General, for these objectives that are rooted in General Assembly and Security Council resolutions, rooted in international law, and we want peace based on international law and relevant UN resolutions and the Arab Peace Initiative. This is what the Arab countries want. This is what the Islamic countries want. This is what the great majority of member states at the United Nations want. We need to see implementation of these resolutions, not reiteration of the principles in them. We will work very closely with you, with the committee, with the leadership of the committee, and all those who are ready and willing to work for peace based on justice, regardless of their location, regardless of their size, their might, or their weakness. We are interested in peace. We are interested in learning the lessons of what existed before the 7th of October. We need to put an end to this tragedy, and the way to do it is to have peace, and there is no plan B, as you always often say, to the two-state solution. We want to make it reality, and we want to make it as soon as possible. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Riyad Mansour. We shall now suspend the meeting for a few minutes to allow the Secretary General to leave. Thank you very much.
So now we are back to our...
Yes.
Go back to...
Turning now to item 5, we would like to take this opportunity to reaffirm our unwavering support for UNRWA, particularly at this critical moment when its mandate and continued operations in the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem, are under threat.
And then the
Thank you very much. In order to show our strong support to UNRWA, I now have the distinct honor of giving the floor to Mrs. Greta Gunnarsdottir, head of UNRWA Liaison Office in New York, who will read a statement by UNRWA Commissioner General Philippe Lazzarini. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, at the outset, I would like to convey warm regards to you from the Commissioner General of UNRWA, Philippe Lazzarini, and thank the committee for inviting UNRWA to speak at your meeting here today. I would also like to congratulate the Chair and the Bureau on your election. I'm delivering the statement on behalf of the Commissioner General, who regrets that he could not be here in person. Excellencies, the Israeli Knesset legislation prohibiting UNRWA's operations in, and I quote, sovereign territory of the State of Israel, unquote, and forbidding contact between Israeli officials and UNRWA representatives entered into force last week. The legislation, which contravenes international law and has been condemned by most UN member states, creates significant operational challenges for the agency. The limitation of visas for international UNRWA staff in occupied East Jerusalem has effectively expelled them. The United Nations has underlined to Israeli authorities that UNRWA's compound in Sheikh Jarrah, which the agency was compelled to evacuate after decades of use, remains a UN building protected by privileges and immunities under international law. Our local staff are continuing to work wherever possible across the occupied West Bank. However, they do so at a considerable personal risk in an increasingly hostile operational environment. Thanks to them, UNRWA schools and health clinics remain open, providing essential services to Palestinian refugees. This week, attendance at our schools has been above 85%, and hundreds of people have sought treatment at our health centers. Our operations in Gaza are also continuing, and a core team of international staff is present. It is unclear how our ability to operate will be constrained by the recently imposed prohibition on contact between UNRWA representatives and Israeli officials. What is clear is that UNRWA remains firmly committed to staying and delivering its mandate from the General Assembly until it is no longer possible to do so. Excellencies, while the ceasefire in Gaza brings hope, the situation on the ground is dire and humanitarian needs are immense. UNRWA is critical to the success of the ceasefire. The agency constitutes half of the emergency response, with all other UN entities and NGOs delivering the other half. Since October 2023, we have delivered 2/3 of all food assistance, providing shelter to over 1 million displaced persons, and vaccinated 250,000 children against polio. Since the ceasefire began, UNRWA has distributed food to more than 750,000 people. We conduct some 17,000 medical consultations every day and have expanded our health services, including in Gaza City and in the north of Gaza. The resumption of education for hundreds of thousands of children remains a priority. Children in Gaza have already lost 2 years of learning. In January alone, more than 260,000 children, half of them girls, enrolled in our online learning platform. Absent a fully fledged state, only UNRWA has the capacity to bring the children back to learning. Curtailing our operations now, when the needs are so high and trust in the international community is so low, will undermine the ceasefire. It will sabotage Gaza's recovery and political transition. In the occupied West Bank, violence is surging. Large parts of Jenin camp have been destroyed in controlled detonations by the Israeli security forces. Depriving Palestinian refugees in the occupied West Bank of UNRWA education and healthcare services will only deepen their vulnerability. Across the occupied Palestinian territory, undermining the agency's work will harm the lives and future of millions of Palestinian refugees. Excellencies, the Knesset legislation is part of a relentless campaign to dismantle UNRWA. The government of Israel is investing significant resources to portray the agency as a terrorist organization and our staff as terrorists or terrorist sympathizers. Billboards and ads accusing UNRWA of terrorism were displaced in major cities around the world, including here in New York. They were paid for by the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Google ad campaigns redirect those seeking information about the agency to websites replete with disinformation. The absurdity of anti-UNRWA propaganda does not diminish the threat it poses to our staff, especially those in the occupied West Bank and Gaza, where 273 of our colleagues have been killed. It sets a precedent for governments to accuse a United Nations entity of terrorism as a pretext to clamp down on human rights. It sets a precedent for criminalizing humanitarian assistance and protection. The political attacks against the agency are motivated by the desire to strip Palestine refugees of their refugee status, thereby unilaterally changing the long-established parameters for a political solution. The objective is to erase the history and identity of the Palestinians and deny them the right to self-determination, the very right that is at the heart of the mandate of this committee. To be clear, the rights of Palestine refugees to protection and assistance are not derived from UNRWA's mandate. They exist independently of the agency. If UNRWA ceases to protect and assist Palestine refugees, their rights will not only remain, but there will be much greater emphasis on the right to return or to be resettled, for which UNRWA has no mandate. The threat posed by political efforts to dismantle UNRWA is compounded by financial challenges, with key donors deciding to end or reduce their contributions to the agency. I am therefore appealing for an urgent increase in financial support, the early disbursement of allocated funds, and a review of funding currently on hold. Excellencies, a ceasefire in Gaza must be followed by a political transition that includes an orderly conclusion of UNRWA's mandate. Only a political pathway can ensure the protection and welfare of Palestine refugees and peace and stability in the region and beyond. A clear choice lies before us. We can allow UNRWA to implode due to the Knesset legislation and the suspension of funding by key donors. The impact on the rights and welfare of Palestine refugees will be catastrophic. Alternatively, we can allow the agency to progressively conclude its mandate within the framework of a political process and hand over its public-like services to empowered and prepared Palestinian institutions. To maximize UNRWA's value in support of the ceasefire and any subsequent political transition, I appeal for the support of the international community on 3 actions. First, push back against the implementation of the Knesset legislation. UNRWA's personnel and services are integral to the success of the ceasefire. Preserving the agency's operational space is critical for upholding the rights of millions of Palestine refugees. Second, insist on a genuine political path forward that delineates UNRWA's role as a provider of education and healthcare. The agency is essential for ensuring a viable political transition. Finally, ensure that the financial crisis does not abruptly end UNRWA's life-saving work. The agency cannot continue to operate in the face of extraordinary challenges without adequate resources. For 75 years, UNRWA has been a stabilizing force and a committed partner for peace in the occupied Palestinian territory. It must be allowed to remain so until a political solution is at hand. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The committee thanks Mrs. Gunnar Stodir for delivering Commissioner General Lazarani's statement, we understand the circumstances preventing his attendance today, but we look forward to welcoming UNRWA at a future committee meeting. Thank you very much. Before we proceed with the agenda, allow me on behalf of the committee to welcome the following delegate who has recently taken up their new post here in New York. His Excellency Mr. Salahuddin Noman Chowdhury, Permanent Representative of Bangladesh to the United Nations. On behalf of the committee, I warmly welcome you amongst its members and observers and wish you success in your work in New York. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, today, turning to items 6 and 7 on the agenda, we will now hear two important briefings, after which the floor will be open for comments, questions, and statements. First, it is my pleasure to invite to speak Mr. Mikhail Fakhri, UN Special Rapporteur on the right to food, who has kindly accepted our invitation to brief the committee on the critical issues surrounding food sovereignty and its fundamental role in preventing starvation and upholding human rights in Palestine, including Gaza. Mr. Fakhri will join us remotely via video conference. You have the floor. You have the floor, sir.
Test. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. We can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay. My apologies, Chair. There was a technical difficulty. Thank you, Chair, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests. Let me begin by explaining from what perspective I'm coming from as the UN Special Rapporteur on the right to food, and then I'll get into specifics. So I recently delivered and presented my report to the General Assembly, to the Third Committee this past October on the issue of starvation with an emphasis on the Palestinian people's food sovereignty. I've been tracking the war in Gaza since it began in October 2023 because Israel announced its intent to starve the civilians of Gaza on October 9th. I appeared before the General Assembly on October 20th, 2023, and I, among several of my colleagues, other mandate holders, were the first to raise the alarm of the risk of genocide in Gaza within the whole UN system. And me, amongst other colleagues, we've been tracking what's been going on a daily basis for the past 14, 15 months. And so what I'm presenting to you is coming from my report, from my work, from my direct interaction with people in Gaza, with a wide range of stakeholders and governments. And what I think what's important to think about when it comes to the ceasefire, I want to build on Ambassador Mansour's point and our colleague from UNRWA, and say, re-emphasize the importance of the ceasefire. But politically, I don't think this is, it's important to understand, it's not a ceasefire. Israel is treating this as a slowing down of its genocide and starvation campaign. Because let's remember, on October 6th, 2023, Gaza had been under a blockade for 23 years, and that 50% of civilians in Gaza on October 6th, 2023, were already food insecure, and 80% depended on humanitarian aid. So the report that I delivered to the General Assembly, I answered the question, how is it even possible for the state of Israel to starve 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza so quickly and so completely? This has been the fastest starvation campaign in modern history. And to answer that question, I had to go back to the beginning of the creation of the State of Israel. If you look at the founding document of UNRWA, one of the purposes and reasons UNRWA was created was this is direct language, to prevent the starvation of the Palestinian people. This is 1948. So yes, the ceasefire is important, and yes, recovery and reconstruction is important. But we have to think about how can the people in Gaza, but Palestine more broadly, West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Palestinians in the state of Israel. In Palestine, there has always been the risk of starvation. So if there's any talk of reconstruction, must think about how can the Palestinian people no longer face the risk of starvation and the risk of genocide. The International Court of Justice has recognized the risk of genocide and recognized that starvation is happening. The International Criminal Court has issued warrants on the crime of starvation against Netanyahu and former Minister Gallant. So this is what's important, is to go back and make sure that people no longer face this risk. This goes to the core then of what are the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people. I just want to emphasize before, and I appreciate the discussion on the importance of a two-state solution, but can we imagine two states being created and, if finally the state of Palestine is well recognized and established, but nevertheless, the state of Palestine will still be next to the state of Israel, which created the conditions of starvation and genocide. So before we talk one state, two state, whatever state solution, going back to the mandate of this committee, what are the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people? First and foremost, the right of return. To re-emphasize what was said by our colleague from UNRWA. The reports from this committee, I strongly recommend, put front and center the right of return and the right of self-determination. That will provide the conditions necessary for all the political negotiations and political solutions going forward. Too often in UN spaces, do people forget the right of return and the right of self-determination. In the last few minutes, I'll talk about what's at stake. So, of course, what's at stake are the Palestinian people's rights. But what we've seen is Israel has not just been attacking Palestinians in Gaza, in the West Bank, in East Jerusalem, and within Israel itself at degrees of violence we've never seen, destroying food systems, creating conditions of hunger that are going to last for generations. But Israel has attacked the UN itself. It has shot at peacekeepers in Lebanon. Israel has killed a record number of UN staff in Gaza, most of them UNRWA staff. We've never seen so many humanitarian workers killed. The human rights system has been under attack by Israel. The mandate holders, we've all been attacked, those of us that have focused on Gaza and on Palestine. And Israel declared the Secretary-General himself persona non grata several months ago. And what I heard ambassadors say in New York when I met with them in October in a group meeting on the issue, several ambassadors said when Israel attacks the UN, it's attacking everyone. And now we're seeing what else is at stake, and this was always true for the last 15 months, is US power and European unity. Without the support of the United States and Germany, amongst others, Israel would not be able to implement its starvation campaign and commit genocide. And now what we're seeing is the United States, under the previous administration, exited international law. They stopped using the language of international law in ways we've never seen. And now we're seeing the US administration not only exit international law, but exit the UN, defunding UNRWA, threatening to defund UNESCO, exiting the Human Rights Council. So what's at stake is the international legal order and the UN itself. So the tools and the mechanisms and the policies that we develop to support the Palestinian people's liberation from occupation, the right to return and the right to self-determination, will be the same tools that we will need to rebuild international law and the UN system that we need. The last point I want to make is that I want to commend the different governments that have created what's called the Hague Group. This is, of course, Senegal, as the chair will know. This is called, the Hague Group is Belize, Bolivia, Colombia, Cuba, Honduras, Malaysia, Namibia, Senegal, and South Africa. This group was created in The Hague by the governments to reaffirm their commitment to implement the ICJ resolutions and the ICC decisions. And the first thing on their agenda, of course, was the International Court of Justice decision finding Israel's occupation illegal. And, of course, we're talking about the General Assembly resolution implementing this. So these are countries, and I invite other countries to join this group, that are committed to implementing international law as we know it. So what's at stake is, of course, Palestine, but the global order itself is at stake. And I put forward my services as the Special Rapporteur on the right to food. I've been following this issue closely, not only in New York, I'm active in Geneva, and I'm active in Rome with the Rome-based agencies focused on food and agriculture. And I know I have many colleagues, and we're eager and willing to work with the committee and with the General Assembly to push all these points forward. Thank you very much, and I look forward to our conversation.
I thank Mr. Fakhri for his important briefing and commend the Special Rapporteur for his important work, including his latest report highlighting this fundamental right. Thank you very much. I now have the pleasure to invite to the podium Mr. Hani Al-Madoun, Senior Director of Philanthropy at UNRWA USA, who has taken the time to be with us and will deliver a briefing on the situation in Gaza from the vantage point of the Palestinian population there, and especially on the issue of humanitarian aid during the war. You have the floor.
Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, and esteemed colleagues, I stand before you today as an American advocate for the Palestinian people and for the humanitarian mission of the United Nations. And I am also here as a grieving brother. Much of my family in north of Gaza, and over the past 16 months, I've been one of the millions of Palestinians around the world who day after day have received news of our families and neighbors experiencing unjustifiable losses and indignities. My world shattered for the first time in November 24, 2023, when Israel dropped a bomb on the family home where my brother lived, killing him, his wife Safa, their 4 beautiful children, and even their beloved cat, Lucky. The house was gone in an instant, reduced to rubble. For a week, my mother stood guard over the lifeless bodies of Majid, Safa, and their children. She was grieving, but at the same time, she had to shield them from the stray and starving dogs. Can you imagine that? Took a full week to retrieve their remains. My family and neighbors had to bury Safa twice because only half of her body could be recovered in the first day. The rest they dug up by hand. And if this wasn't enough to process, my world shattered again. A few days later, when footage emerged from North Gaza, Palestinian men being paraded by the Israeli army in their underwear as if they were part of some grotesque spectacle. I looked closely, and there he was, my other brother Mahmoud, humiliated and falsely accused of being a fighter. He's not. He has never been. He's not even physically fit enough to run for more than 10 minutes. When some courageous journalists started asking questions about the footage, the lies fell apart, and they released my brother, barefoot, in his boxers, and left far from his home with nothing but the indignity they had forced upon him. My world continued to shatter 2 weeks later. I picked up my phone and I saw a video of my sister Samah trying to bake bread using animal feed. My family had run out of flour and pasta, and the only option left was rabbit food. She told me it smelled so unbearable that even their cat refused to eat it. This was devastating for me to hear, not only as her brother, but because I am the Senior Director of Philanthropy at UNRWA USA, which is an American not-for-profit that supports the amazing and critical work of UNRWA, the UN agency. See, individual efforts, no matter how heartfelt, cannot replace the comprehensive support that established institutions like UNRWA provide. UNRWA's role in delivering essential wide-scale services, education, healthcare, and humanitarian aid is indispensable to the well-being of the Palestinian refugees. The thing about the humanitarian work, though, is that people will find a way to keep at it. I hear the news of this every day in my work. UNRWA staff across the occupied Palestinian territories continue to find ways to help as many people as they can, even with very little. And I saw it in my third brother's devotion to caring for the people. In February 2024, right around Valentine's Day, amid my family's suffering, my brother Mahmoud and I managed to co-found the Gaza Soup Kitchen in Beit Lahia in North Gaza. It started with Mahmoud cooking over a simple open fire place, and soon it became a lifeline, serving hot meals to thousands of families every day and helping to avert more victims of the famine Israel has imposed on our people in Gaza. I'm here to tell you the famine in Israel. We've served food for people at the Kamal Adwan Hospital at the malnourished division. But Chef Mahmoud's vision was never just about food. By late summer of last year, he had also set up a medical clinic that was treating up to 75 patients when the hospitals were placed under siege. Small clinics like that were life-saving. He would provide things like baby formula and diapers. By the fall, he had founded a small school to provide lessons to 560 children. In fact, in the school, he put a sign in Hebrew that read, "Please do not bomb," and he put the American flag. Many others in Gaza have launched similar efforts over the months. And so many people over the world have helped keep this work going, including many from the United States. Many families like mine who had already been displaced 10 times before the brutal assault have never once considered leaving Gaza. This is important because as devastating as these 16 months have been, this is not a new story. Our elders who survived the 1948 Nakba taught us that historically Palestinians who leave home are never allowed to return. And whenever the world failed the Palestinian people, when food was denied, when resources were blocked, the land did not. It gave them wild greens, porcelain, and mallow Swiss chard to survive on. It held them when no one in the world would. That's why forcing Palestinians out of Gaza is as unrealistic as draining the ocean. Real progress lies in the pursuit of justice and freedom of our people, of economic development and stability, and of a genuine and lasting peace. But in the meantime, Gaza endures, not just through struggle, but through resilience, through the unbreakable bond between its people and its earth. I wish I could tell you my world stopped shattering, but it happened again. This past November, Mahmoud, my dear brother, and North Gaza's beloved chef, was targeted and killed by an Israeli strike. When it happened, Mahmoud was just 30 yards from the shelter where his 7 children awaited his return. His youngest, just weeks old. His death was not an accident. It was a deliberate act meant to silence anyone who stands in the way of Gaza's erasure. Mahmoud was not a fighter. He's a father. He was a father, a humanitarian, and a man devoted to his community. His only crime was his unwavering commitment to organizing humanitarian aid, delivering meals, and sustaining those around him. Last week in North Gaza, my family set out with heavy hearts to move Chef Mahmoud to the town's cemetery as he had been placed in a makeshift grave. We wanted to put him near our 3 siblings, but when the family arrived, they found devastation. Israeli tanks had erased the graves, leaving only rubble and uncertainty. We could not find our loved ones' resting places. We could not lay Mahmoud beside them as we had planned. The trauma to my family at this moment is indescribable. Yet even in this heartbreak, my only surviving brother, Muhammad, may have found a grave for our brother Mahmoud. He is now moving my brother carefully, wrapping him in a new shroud. May his memory be eternal. Like thousands of families in Gaza, we may no longer have graves to visit, but we hold on to one truth: our loved ones are with their Creator. This personal tragedy is but a reflection of the broader suffering endured by countless Palestinian families. The relentless assault and deliberate starvation and the systematic attempt to force displacement are not isolated incidents, but part of a broader strategy by this illegal occupation that strikes at the heart of our existence. In the face of such adversity, we remain steadfast. We continue finding ways to support one another and to draw strength from the land and from the support and loving people around the world, many of whom are in this room. That's why, in these trying times, leaders must reaffirm a collective commitment to upholding the rights of the dignity of the Palestinian people, and must ensure that UNRWA continue its work as mandated by the United Nations. This is not merely an act of charity, but a reinforcement of our shared values and dedication to justice, and if it's important to you, national interest. To date, my colleagues and I at UNRWA USA have coordinated delivering tens of millions in grassroots donations to sustain UNRWA's education, healthcare, and food assistance for millions of refugees. It warmed our hearts to see individual donors came from across the United States and more than 80 countries to support our work, including from Israel, from within Israel, and from diverse places of worship like synagogues, churches, mosques, and even concert halls. What's more, so many countries represented here today have long extended support to the Palestinian people and continue to do so in these darkest of times. And now, we need to be able to continue raising and delivering these crucial funds. It will require an immense amount of work, assistance, and funding to rebuild Gaza, and to even begin to help Palestine refugees take back their dignity yet again. And Palestinians will rebuild. I thank the community on the exercise of the unalienable rights for the Palestinian people for inviting me to share my story today from both my Palestinian community and my American one. And I thank the committee for all the work it has been doing for so many years and for the moral clarity and for until the realization of justice, freedom, dignity, and peace for all our people. Thank you, esteemed colleagues. I leave you with what dear Chef Mahmoud used to say whenever he closes the videos in Arabic. He used to say, "Mustamirreen," which means we will continue. Thank you so much.
I thank Mr. Al-Madoun for his briefing. The committee reaffirms its support for your organization and the many Palestinians in Gaza who self-organized during the war and its aftermath to provide humanitarian aid initiatives like the Gaza Soup Kitchen. We extend our deepest condolences to the families of all humanitarian workers, UNRWA staff and CSO, NGO staff personnel, and other Palestinian aid workers who have lost their lives in service, feeding and supporting Gaza's besieged, starved, and deprived Gaza population. I would like now to open the floor for statements. In view of the full agenda today, I would ask Excellencies to be as brief as possible. I recognize Yes. Turkey, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I congratulate you and other colleagues who are elected to the Bureau. I wish all of us a success in the coming period because a challenging time is ahead of us. Today's meeting takes place at a pivotal moment. We firmly reject any efforts to forcibly displace or relocate Palestinians from Gaza and annexation of any Palestinian territory. Any forcible transfer of Palestinians from Gaza or other occupied Palestinian territories is prohibited and would constitute a serious violation of international law. Turkish Foreign Minister made it clear that displacement plan is unacceptable and even opening this up for discussion is unacceptable. We reject all initiatives that seek to exclude the people of Gaza from the equation. After 15 months of unrelenting suffering, the realization of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people is more urgent than ever. Consequently, the work of this committee remains as crucial as ever. Excellencies, to be brief, I renew our commitment also to the work of UNRWA in general and flow of humanitarian assistance to Gaza and Palestine in general. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Indonesia, you have the floor. Dear Ambassador.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and allow me to first of all extend my warmest congratulations to you on your appointment. I also thank the UN Secretary-General for his unwavering commitment, as well as all briefers for their invaluable and sobering insights. Mr. Chair, the ceasefire offers a brief respite after 50 months of relentless bombardment in Gaza. However, a ceasefire alone is not enough. The challenges ahead remain enormous, and in this regard, Indonesia strongly rejects any attempt to forcibly displace Palestinians or alter the demographic composition of the occupied Palestinian territory. We reaffirm that the only viable path to lasting peace in the region is by addressing the root cause, namely illegal Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territory. We are also concerned that as we speak, Israeli aggression in the West Bank is escalating, perpetuating the cycle of conflict. For this reason, a ceasefire must also break the cycle of violence the Palestinian people have endured far too much, far too long. The committee has a duty to end their suffering by upholding their inalienable rights to self-determination, independence, and their right to return. Mr. Chair, as we embark on the committee's work for 2025, allow me to highlight three key points. First, we must focus on full implementation of relevant UN resolutions on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Various UN Security Council resolutions, ICJ provisional measures, advisory opinions, and GA resolutions reflect a global legal and political consensus on resolving this conflict. Their implementation is crucial in advancing a just and lasting solution. To achieve this, our program of work must connect and align and contribute to all ongoing initiatives, which include the AOICJ proceedings on Israel's obligation towards the UN, the Fourth Geneva Convention Conference, and the High-Level International Conference on Two-State Solution in June 2025. These efforts must ultimately lead to ending the illegal occupation and uphold Palestinian rights. Second, we must continue safeguarding and advocating for the full implementation of UNRWA's mandate. UNRWA remains indispensable, not only in delivering humanitarian aid, but also in protecting the rights of Palestinian refugees, a fundamental pillar of any lasting peace. Therefore, its role is central to the work of this committee. The recent Knesset legislation aimed at weakening UNRWA must be unequivocally condemned. We must take decisive action to counter this effort and safeguard the agency's ability to fulfill the mandate. Third, this committee must play a pivotal role in sustaining international engagement and solidarity with the Palestinian people and to safeguard the two-state solution. We will strengthen our collaboration with stakeholders, regional groups, and key partners to amplify Palestinian voices, mobilize political will, and push back against efforts that obstruct their fundamental rights. Indonesia remains resolute in our commitment and will continue working with the committee to uphold the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Tunisia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Your Excellency, Ambassador Kolisek, congratulations upon your election to chair the Committee of the United Nations on the exercise of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people. We support the work of your committee in defending the rights of the brotherly Palestinian people. We commend the ceasefire, yet we reaffirm that this agreement should not make us forget the responsibility of the international community to hold the perpetrators accountable for these crimes committed against the Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank. My country emphasizes the vital role of UNRWA. We reiterate our steadfast support to the Palestinian people in this crucial moment in its struggle in order to fulfill its legitimate and inalienable rights, which will not be subjected to the statute of limitations, and to establish the independent state on the entirety of the land of Palestine, with Jerusalem East as the capital. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Venezuela, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to congratulate you on your re-election and wish you every success in this very important responsibility. Even more given the central role that this committee has to play in this current context. I'd also like to congratulate the ambassadors of Cuba, Indonesia, Nicaragua, Namibia, Malaysia for their re-election as vice chairs of the committee and the Bureau. We'd like to wish every success in implementing the program of work, a task in which you can count on the wholehearted support of our delegation. We're also grateful for the update provided by Ambassador Mansour regarding the latest developments in occupied Palestinian territory and the overriding and urgent need to preserve both the dignity of the noble Palestinian people as well as a political horizon that allows us, without further ado, to achieve a comprehensive, just, and lasting solution to the question of Palestine. We're also grateful for the valuable presentations of the representative of UNRWA, to which we'd like to express our wholehearted moral, ethical, and political support, as well as thank Mr. Rapporteur Fakhri and Mr. Al-Madoun. Mr. Chairman, the question of Palestine is a topic of foreign policy to which my country attaches great importance. In this context, allow me to start by confirming our firm commitment to this just cause, as well as our unshakable solidarity with the brethren Palestinian people that does not tire and will never tire to fight for the realization of their legitimate national aspirations, including the right to their inalienable rights, such as self-determination and a free Palestinian independent and sovereign state with East Jerusalem as their capital and pre-1967 borders. The situation on the ground is truly grave and serious, both from a security, development, human rights, or humanitarian point of view, to which we are seeing constant attempts to dismantle and cut financing from UNRWA, on which millions depend. And although the situation in Gaza is improving, starting from the beginning of the ceasefire agreed a little over 2 weeks ago, the reality is that while there is a fragile perception of progress in Gaza, the situation is becoming more complex in other places of occupied Palestinian territory. I would like to stress that the ceasefire agreement, which my country has welcomed, and on which supposedly a second phase of negotiations will begin, could be affected due to the latest developments on the West Bank and the launching of the so-called Iron Wall operation by the Israeli occupation forces, and that has resulted inter alia in the destruction of vital infrastructure and refugee camps of UNRWA, without mentioning the amount of death and pain that it has left behind it. Mr. Chairman, the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela considers that in light of everything I've said and aware of the current geopolitical context, characterized inter alia by a set of truly concerning declarations by the government of the United States, which not only undermine the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people, but undermine the very viability of a two-state solution, that my country categorically rejects such declarations. This committee is called upon to urgently advance towards fully implementing its mandate, which is why I suggest intensifying our work and on this platform. For this platform to play a central and proactive role regarding the upcoming international conference, high-level conference for the peaceful solution of the Palestinian question and the implementation of the two-state solution, including the process of preparatory process of its final document. In conclusion, I'd like to reiterate the full support of my country for the work of this committee and our readiness to actively and constructively participate in its work until we achieve the possibility for the brethren Palestinian people to fully enjoy their inalienable rights, including the right to free determination, and to ensure that the Security Council fully assumes its responsibility, and that this same organ correct, without further ado, a historical injustice by admitting Palestine as a fully fledged member of the United Nations. It's our duty to advance and change the current situation, especially this year, as we commemorate the 80th anniversary of the establishment of our organization, to achieve tangible results that allow us to move once and for all towards a solution of what is, without a doubt, one of the most painful and long-standing conflicts of our times. Venezuela reiterates its wholehearted support and unshakable commitment to the Bolivarian peace diplomacy for the just Palestinian cause that we embrace and will always embrace as our own. Thank you.
Merci.
I thank you. I give the floor to Malaysia.
Thank you, Chair. Congratulations on your appointment, and congratulations also to all members of the Bureau of the Committee. Malaysia is honored to continue to serve in the Bureau as Vice Chair and Rapporteur as the committee commemorates its 50th anniversary this year. Chair, Malaysia welcomes the ceasefire deal. However, we are also increasingly concerned with the escalating tensions in the West Bank due to heightened operations by the occupying forces. This poses a serious threat to the fragile ceasefire in Gaza. Malaysia also condemns Israel's actions of banning the operations of UNRWA. We salute UNRWA staff who continue to perform their responsibilities even at great personal risks. We reiterate that UNRWA's functions as the backbone of humanitarian responses and provider of all essential services to the Palestinian refugees are indispensable and irreplaceable. Indeed, UNRWA's continued operations is critical to the success of the ceasefire. UNRWA must be defended. The two-state solution is the only viable and internationally recognized pathway towards ensuring sustainable peace in the region. We are appalled by talks of forcibly displacing Palestinians out of their homeland. Malaysia will continue to work closely with other members of the committee and wider member states to advocate for the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people to self-determination and the establishment of a sovereign state of Palestine. Thank you.
I thank Malaysia, and I'll give the floor to Guyana.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I congratulate you, the Vice Chairs and officers of the Bureau, on your election and wish you success in carrying out your functions at this most critical time for the Palestinian people. Indeed, the work of this committee remains most crucial at this time. I also thank the Secretary General, the Permanent Observer of the State of Palestine, representatives of UNRWA and of UNRWA USA, and the UN Special Rapporteur on the Right to Food for their briefings. Mr. Chair, we are at a crucial crossroads for the Palestinian people and for the Middle East as a whole. With the first phase of the recently agreed ceasefire taking hold, there is hope among the Palestinian people and indeed across the world, while recognizing that there is a long road ahead towards rebuilding their lives, livelihoods, and homes. The ceasefire must be a stepping stone to lasting peace. Guyana urges that the negotiations between the parties continue in good faith to progress to a permanent end to the war and the release of all hostages. We welcome the increased supply of humanitarian aid into Gaza and the start of medical evacuations, particularly for children. We, however, call for the urgent removal of administrative impediments to the full operationalization of these efforts. Mr. Chair, we are deeply concerned that while on the one hand there is a cessation of hostilities in Gaza, a new front is opening in the occupied West Bank with the ongoing Israeli military operations, particularly in Jenin, Tulkarm, and Tubas. The scenes in the occupied West Bank are all too familiar and are reminiscent of what we have seen in Gaza over the past 15 months. The increased attacks in the occupied West Bank compound the violence that Palestinians have continuously been subjected to on account of Israeli settlement practices and policies. The pattern of violent conflict between Israel and Palestine is unsustainable. Efforts toward the two-state solution must advance with urgency to achieve a permanent end to the oppression that Palestinians face. Guyana is also concerned that attacks on the occupied West Bank are escalating at a time when there is reduced capacity to respond to the humanitarian and other needs of the Palestinian people, as UNRWA is no longer authorized to operate in the area following the entry into force of the Israeli legislation. In the circumstances, we remind that Israel, as the occupying power, must uphold its obligations under international humanitarian law to ensure that the humanitarian needs of civilians throughout the occupied Palestinian territory are met. We reiterate our unwavering support for UNRWA and call for the agency to be allowed to carry out its critical functions. It is well recognized that UNRWA is the only agency with the capacity to facilitate the delivery of services to the Palestinian people at the required scale. Mr. Chair, Guyana reiterates that it was the General Assembly that created UNRWA's mandate, and therefore it is only the General Assembly that can alter or terminate that mandate. We look forward to the ICJ advisory opinion on Israel's obligations regarding the presence of UN entities in the occupied Palestinian territories, which was requested by the General Assembly. We underscore the importance of keeping the Palestinian question on the agenda of the international community and of accelerating efforts to secure a comprehensive, just, and peaceful solution of the conflict. To this end, Guyana continues to support and affirms the legitimacy of the two-state solution based on the pre-1967 borders. I thank you.
I thank Guyana, and I give the floor to Cuba.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to convey to you my warmest congratulations on your election to head this committee. I'd also like to congratulate my colleagues from Nicaragua, Indonesia, and Namibia on their election as vice chairs, and Malaysia is vice chair and rapporteur. We're grateful to our brother, Ambassador Mansour, and the other speakers for their presentations and briefings. We're also grateful for the support and trust expressed in our election as a co-chair, and we assume this responsibility with the greatest commitment to continue defending the just Palestinian cause in our work in the committee and within the United Nations. Mr. Chairman, according to the Gaza Ministry of Health, between the 7th of October 23 and the 28th of January 2025, at least 47,354 Palestinians have been killed in this territory, and 111,500 have been wounded. The humanitarian panorama of Gaza, as we know, requires an urgent and effective response. We reject the ban by Israel on the activities of UNRWA that compromises the delivery of basic services and humanitarian aid in Gaza. The work of UNRWA is essential to ensure the delivery of humanitarian assistance to occupied Palestinian territories. To prohibit the work of UNRWA today means undermining the present and the future of the Palestinian people. It's a time to put an end to the injustice and to end more than 7 decades of attacks, exclusion, without mentioning the forced displacement of entire families from the land that belonged to them. We must end urgently all colonizing and settler policies of Israel in Palestinian territories, including its apartheid policies. We condemn the policies of Israel in West Bank, which expand the genocide. We will continue to propose a lasting and comprehensive solution to the conflict based on a two-state solution that allows the Palestinians to exercise their right to self-determination and to have an independent sovereign state with East Jerusalem as their capital and in pre-1967 borders that also guarantees the right of return of the refugees. The government of Israel and the United States must respect the fact that Gaza and the other Palestinian territories belong exclusively to the Palestinian people. We will continue to advocate for the fulfillment of the 3 phases of the ceasefire agreement in Gaza as a new opportunity to put an end once and for all to an attempt to exterminate an entire people and to achieve a solution to the conflict. You can count on our support to continue demanding an unconditional and immediate admission of Palestine as a fully fledged member of the United Nations, and to our brethren Palestinian brothers, we will continue to support the legitimate Palestinian cause. Thank you.
I thank Cuba, and I give the floor to Egypt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would like to thank the briefers for their briefings that they have provided us. So, Mr. Chair, the realization of the inalienable right of the Palestinian people to the right to self-determination through the establishment of the independent, contiguous Palestinian state on the borders of 4 June 1967 with East Jerusalem as its capital has been and continues to be a cornerstone of Egypt's policy. And against this backdrop, Egypt, with Qatar and the United States, we have exerted immense efforts to induce a ceasefire in Gaza after more than 15 months of fighting, actually of heavy bombardment by Israel against Palestinian civilians in an episode of a long series exemplifying the struggle of the Palestinian people under illegal occupation. In addition, and on the humanitarian front, Egypt has been keen to ensure the entry of humanitarian assistance to the Palestinian people trapped in Gaza through the Rafah border from the Egyptian side, and our efforts continue in this domain, especially that we have passed through the first phase of the ceasefire, so we are very keen to ensure the entry of humanitarian assistance. In addition, we've also been receiving Palestinians through the Rafah border to Egypt to receive medical treatment. And this is only part of what Egypt thinks is due to the Palestinian people to assist them in their struggle. And we continue to work on this front. Of course, a cornerstone of the discussion that we're having today and also in other fora is the attack on UNRWA and its delegitimization and undermining the work that it has done for the sake of the Palestinian people for more than 70 years now. Commemorating the 50th anniversary of this committee is only a manifestation of maybe the failure of the international community to assist the Palestinian people in gaining their right to self-determination. And this is what we all should be striving for and working for, so long as we can have those fora and those venues to push and advocate for this just cause. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I give the floor to Nicaragua.
Thank you, dear Mr. Chairman. Allow me to express our sincere congratulations to you on your election as chair of our committee. We know very well that with your experience and knowledge, we have no doubt that the committee will continue to move forward on the path of justice, truth and respect, and the implementation of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people. We also want to congratulate our brothers ambassadors from Cuba, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Namibia for their re-election as vice chair and rapporteur of this important committee. For Nicaragua, it's an honor, and we're very proud to continue to be a member of this committee and of its bureau. Our conviction and solidarity is with the people of Palestine, and we will continue to support all initiatives that will lead once and for all to the freedom of the Palestinian people, the end of Israeli occupation, and the achievement of a free, sovereign, and independent Palestinian state exercising its inalienable right to self-determination, its right of return to its Palestinian territories, and the possibility of living in peace and security with East Jerusalem as its capital. Our committee must continue to use all the necessary means, all available means, to continue to denouncing the war crimes and brutality and genocide and dehumanization that Israel has perpetrated against the heroic Palestinian people for decades. The Palestinian cause must be at the heart of our work. It is a moral and historical debt of the United Nations, and which up to now has not been able to resolve this conflict. Quite to the contrary, it continues to be manipulated and trampled on by Israel, the occupying power, without any respect for international law or international humanitarian law and the agreements reached with the United Nations. As this committee, we must demand the upholding of all relevant resolutions approved by the United Nations, especially the resolution adopted during the emergency special session on Palestine, as well as the advisory opinion issued by the International Court of Justice in July of 2024. We're grateful for the update provided by our brother Riyad Mansour, representative of Palestine, on the latest developments and gravity of the situation in all throughout occupied Palestinian territory, where violence has only increased. We're also grateful to Mr. Fakhri and Mr. Al-Mahdoun for their briefings, which demonstrate with the cruelty of this unprecedented genocide. Our solidarity, and we'd like to express our solidarity and continued support for your work. Mr. Chairman, it is essential that in our committee we continue to listen more and more the voices of the people of the world, of various people's organizations, labor unions, professional organizations, doctors, and various humanitarian organizations that bear witness to the suffering and the pain of the thousands of Palestinians that live in the occupied territories. Every day we know there are more and more killings of children, Palestinian children. In these turbulent times of great change, we must continue with great determination and to reject the recent declarations that imply any attempt to expel or displace the Palestinian population from its territories. Declarations of annexation or expansion of Israeli settlements in Palestinian territories. These are immoral actions. The Palestinian people is the only one that can decide on its future, and the United Nations must protect the Palestinian people and We are grateful to Madam Greta Gunadottir, who reminds us of the importance of the work of UNRWA for the subsistence, for the daily bread of the Palestinian people. We must reiterate that this committee must assume and fulfill the mandate of protecting the Palestinian people, in particular the work that UNRWA is doing, which is a vital factor for the survival and subsistence of the Palestinian people. This imposition by Israel on the United Nations of closing the offices of UNRWA on Palestinian territory, claiming to exercise sovereignty that does not belong to it, it's nothing more than a new mode of genocide against the Palestinian people. That is not enough to kill Palestinians with bombs and projectiles, but now to try to kill them with hunger, disease, and other calamities that will emerge if UNRWA does not continue its work. Mr. Chairman, to conclude, we always continue to hear that there's a universal consensus for a two-state solution. We will continue to insist that there might be good intentions from Western countries with these statements, but what is necessary is the recognition of a Palestinian state. Palestine should be accepted as a fully fledged member of the UN, and the Security Council must accept the application of Palestine. That is the response of the Western states in response to the demand for a two-state solution. Nicaragua will continue to advocate in all possible forms the end of impunity, the end of occupation, and the end of the provision of weapons and support for Israel. History will recall with shame all those who were accomplices and all those who remained silent and thus contributed to the genocide and the suffering of the Palestinian people. We are also convinced that the Palestinian people will be free. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nicaragua. I give the floor to Qatar, the last speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to thank the Secretary-General for his thoughtful remarks, which reflect the moral authority of the UN and its long-standing commitment to the just cause of Palestine. I also commend the Chair and Vice Chairs of the Committee for their dedication and hard work on behalf of our Palestinian brothers and sisters during these challenging times. Furthermore, I congratulate the newly elected Chair and Vice Chairs of the Committee. I reiterate the State of Qatar's unwavering commitment to the Committee's mandate and advocacy, emphasizing its crucial role in addressing the unresolved question of Palestine and the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Gaza and throughout the occupied Palestinian territory, including the West Bank and Jerusalem. The State of Qatar is pleased that its continuous and dedicated efforts, alongside those of Egypt and the United States, have successfully secured the ceasefire in Gaza and the prisoner swap agreement between Israel and Hamas. We call upon all parties to fully implement the agreement in all stages and provisions to achieving lasting calm. It is essential to maintain the ceasefire, to ensure the unhindered delivery of humanitarian aid across the Gaza Strip, removing any obstacles to the entry of support for shelter, recovery, and rehabilitation in a safe and effective manner. We affirm the importance of the international community's coordinated efforts to plan and implement a comprehensive reconstruction process in the Gaza Strip as soon as possible. This process should ensure that Palestinians remain on their land, reflecting their steadfastness, while also improving daily life for residents and addressing issues of internal displacement until reconstruction is completed. We emphasize the indispensable role of UNRWA as the backbone of humanitarian assistance for the Palestinian people, particularly in Gaza. Therefore, we caution that any prohibition of the agency's activities will lead to serious humanitarian and political consequences. I reiterate the State of Qatar's firm position in support of the legitimate rights of the brotherly Palestinian people, foremost of which is their right to establish their own independent state on the 1967 borders, with East Jerusalem as its capital, based on the vision of the two-state solution. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank you very much. Pakistan, you have the floor. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the past 15 months saw unprecedented destruction and immense human suffering inflicted upon the people of Gaza. 46,000 Palestinians' lives were lost due to Israel's brutal military assault, and the majority of them were women and children. These indiscriminate and genocidal attacks constituted blatant violations of international law, including international humanitarian law. Finally, there is some reprieve for the Gazans. A ceasefire has finally silenced the frightening sounds of tanks, drones, bombs, and aircrafts. Pakistan hopes and urges that all provisions of the ceasefire agreement be fully implemented to ensure that this cessation of hostilities becomes permanent and that Palestinian civilians are spared further suffering. Mr. President, while we welcome the recently announced ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, it must not be used as an opportunity to escalate violence in other occupied Palestinian territories. Unfortunately, we are witnessing another flurry of attacks on Palestinians, as if the Palestinian soul is not valued. Following the ceasefire in Gaza, Israel forces have significantly intensified their military operations in the West Bank now. There has been a sharp increase in military raids and settler attacks, particularly in the refugee camp of Jenin. Mr. President, the scale of devastation now mirrors the catastrophic destruction that was seen in Gaza. The UN Security Council Resolution 2334 affirms that Israeli settlements in Palestinian territories occupied since 1967, including East Jerusalem, are illegal under international law. East Jerusalem remains occupied territory under multiple UN resolutions, and any attempts to alter its demographic and legal status are both unlawful and unacceptable. The same holds for the territory of Gaza. Mr. President, the ceasefire in Gaza must not serve as a pretext for Israel to intensify military aggression in the West Bank. We must swiftly halt this violence, and we must hold the occupying power accountable. And we must not let the situation escalate and repeat a Gaza 2.0 in the West Bank. Secondly, UNRWA, with its extensive network of schools, healthcare facilities, and humanitarian services, UNRWA is unmatched and indispensable in its capacity to provide life-saving assistance, the resumption of education for hundreds of thousands of children, and provision of healthcare to millions of Palestinians. It would also be crucial for the reconstruction of Gaza. UNRWA and its heroic personnel have continued to operate within the Palestinian territories in Gaza in face of directed attacks against them, in which more than 270 of their personnel have lost their lives. The viability and survival of UNRWA is being threatened by the implementation of the Knesset legislations. This legislation, banning UNRWA's activities, violates the UN Charter, international law, and the advisory opinion of ICJ of 19 July 2024. Finally, the Security Council and the broader international community must renew efforts to achieve a just and lasting peace based on a two-state solution of which both Gaza and West Bank are a part. The Palestinian people have an inalienable right to self-determination, and peace can only be realized through the establishment of a sovereign, independent, and contiguous Palestinian state along pre-1967 borders with Al-Quds al-Sharif as its capital. Any delay in pursuing a political resolution will only perpetuate violence and instability in the region. Mr. President, we stand at a defining moment in history. The world is watching. We need to fulfill our responsibility to uphold international law. The Palestinian people look to us for hope, justice, and the promise of peace. We must not fail them. The bloodshed must end, the occupation must end, and the relentless suffering of innocent Palestinians must end. I thank you.
Thank you very much. There are no other speakers who wish to take the floor. Let us move on to agenda item 8, and I give the floor to the Secretariat to briefly introduce the program.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief, as you already have the document, the draft program of work in front of you. I'll quickly run through the various sections. Section 1 outlines the mandate of the committee and the division of Palestinian rights is contained in the relevant General Assembly resolutions 77/22 and 79/82. Section 2 enumerates the activities of the committee and the division for Palestinian rights for 2025, and in particular, and against the backdrop of the recently announced ceasefire deal, the committee remains committed to fostering lasting peace, Palestinian unity, and a negotiated two-state solution where Israel and Palestine coexist in peace and security. As agreed by the Bureau of the Committee, the priorities for 2025 will be centered around four main aspects of the mandate. The first one being the mobilization of the diplomatic community, and the Bureau is already targeted, convening a meeting with the E10 of the Security Council to sensitize them on the question of Palestine and the status of the situation, in the occupied Palestinian territory. We will also commemorate the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian People in November, as well as the commemoration of the Nakba, which was mandated in the last General Assembly resolution. Section B is to raise awareness on the question of Palestine, including through the website of the committee, the UNISPAL website, as well as convening committee conferences, events, as well as issuing of publications and activities, on social media to convey messages and raising key issues on the question of Palestine. Subsection C highlights the committee's cooperation with intergovernmental organizations, non-governmental organizations, interparliamentary organizations, as well as the United Nations system entities, including rapporteurs and independent commissions working on the subject matter. Finally, subsection D informs about the planned capacity development program for the staff of the government of State of Palestine. And lastly, and by no means the least, section 3 refers to the practice of regularly reviewing and assessing and adjusting the program's activities. In short, the program of work was crafted to enable greater flexibility during the implementation of the program, as well as to accommodate activities related to the fast evolving events on the ground. Mr. Chair, I will stop here.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Patrice. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we count on your continued engagement for the successful implementation of the committee's program of work and its mandate. I now open the floor for any comments you may have before we adopt the draft. Is there any comments? If no, the draft is adopted. It is so decided. As this is the first committee meeting since November 2024, I would like to express my gratitude to committee members and partners for their strong support during the observance of 2024 International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian People. I would like also to highlight the exhibit Gaza, Palestine, a crisis of unity and a cry for justice, which is our committee displayed at UN headquarters visitors area. This powerful exhibition is now available online, ensuring continued access to its important message. Before we proceed to agenda item 9, other business, I would like to inform you about recent and upcoming activities of the committee. But this has been done. Thank you very much. I would like to inform you that the Bureau will hold a major stakeout outside the ECOSOC chamber at just after the closing of this meeting. Let me conclude by informing that all statements delivered today will be available on the UNIPSAL website, which offers the widest collection of documents on the question of Palestine in different languages, including those prepared by the Division for the Palestinian Rights, monthly bulletins, weekly NGO action news, annual compilations of United Nations resolution and report. Are there any other matters to be raised, dear colleague, distinguished delegate? I don't see. If there are no other matters to be discussed, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much. The meeting is adjourned.
Somebody send me a check.